Welcome to Bill the Lender podcast, devoted to educating you on a variety of financial subjects with an emphasis on real estate and real estate finance. Please click the button to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss an episode. Then like and share your favorite episodes. Hello and welcome everyone to this week's Bill the Lender podcast. I'm your host, Bill the Lender, and this week we have our first international guest, Jodielynn Craven. For a decade, Jodielynn Craven has served in a role of a financial advisor, financial educator, and creator of Abundance Conscienceness and the Fluid Money Blueprint. Jodielynn has over a decade of advanced knowledge, experience, and expertise in modern financial structures and alternatively, the mindset and energy behind money. Her work in the energetics behind money, application of alternative money modalities, and her signature process, Fluid Money Blueprint, a step-by-step guide for entrepreneurs who want to learn how to consistently attract money, has brought her into the spotlight among clients all over the globe. Jodielynn, welcome to today's podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, well, and I think it comes at a really good time because obviously, at least in the United States, I don't know how things are in Canada, but we are in turbulent times, inflation at all-time highs, and people have a lot of fear. And of course, our media doesn't do anything but fear-mongering for ratings. And we often talk about on the show the true facts around, some of the things that are happening in the market. So I'm very, very excited to talk about the Money Blueprint and your thoughts around how to effectively approach the money conversation in a time when there's just so much fear, so much fear. So what is abundance consciousness and how is it applicable today to our audience?
Beautiful question. Okay, I feel like I kind of have to go back in my lifetime story to tell you what abundance consciousness really is. I mean, the framework of abundance consciousness is being mindful of how you're influencing money in your life. For me, I went through the 2008 financial crisis. I foreclosed on a home. We owned a home, me and my then boyfriend. And when the 2008 financial crisis happened, we purchased at the peak of everything. And then when our relationship fell apart, it was at the bottom of the market. The housing market had crashed, all of that. So our house was worth about half of what we owed on it. So wow. I went through all of that. And during that, I had this, burning fire to learn more about finances. And that's when I entered into the financial world part-time, started learning how everything works and then started helping clients understand how this stuff works. But fast forward a couple of years in, I started to notice that it wasn't just the multiplication and division that we do with numbers, like you need more money, it's that simple, A plus B equals C. I would free up, $1,000 for clients, many clients. And then I would go back in a year after building them this amazing plan on how to get out of debt and, how to have all this money in their bank account in a year from now. And I'd go back and they'd be in a worse position than when we actually started. So I started to see that it was the mindset that they had, that they were bringing to the table that kept recreating this old reality that they were trying so desperately to get out of, and that adding more money didn't actually fix it. And then I started to dive into mindset and how that influences things. And then I started to dive into the energy. And by energy, I mean the way that we are perceiving the situation and the way that we feel about things, because our energy is speaking before we ever say a word. And the reason why this is so relevant today is something that you mentioned earlier. It's that fear. Now, when we go as humans into fear mode, this is simply a limbic response where our body is fight, flight, or freeze. And when we're in that state, what happens to our brain and our body is our brain and our body are working in overdrive to get us out of that scary place where the tiger is chasing us. logic and reason does not live here. So if you're constantly right now living in a state of fear, you can't logically make decisions. You can't logically talk yourself off the ledge because your system doesn't have the capacity to do so. And that's truly abundance consciousness, is understanding how you are making the situation worse or better, both within the mindset as well as in what you're feeling and what you're putting out there with your energy.
So are there some, one of the things that's really interesting about certainly our culture is you're bombarded by things all of the time. And, certainly with social media, it sort of keys into what you focus on and how you're interacting, and your reality starts to reaffirm itself. And if you're in this negative state of mind, are there some practical tips? Some easy things that are quick fixes that might switch that mindset and get somebody unhooked?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's really important to mention at this point that this is what your brain is designed to do. Find the things that are important to you, prove that they are true. So if you have a mindset coming from this place of fear of, I don't have enough, your brain is forced to go looking. It's called the Reticular Activator. It's forced to go looking for situations that provide you with that truth, that belief system, that evidence that is there. So the first thing, and this is why I created the Fluid Money Blueprint, so the 3 steps of the Fluid Money Blueprint. But right away, what I would do is start asking yourself some really solid questions. How do I feel? Gain that clarity on what you're afraid of, because most people, they'll live in that fear response, but they have no idea what they're afraid of. And it's okay. I was there too. I would go into this fear response of, I don't have enough money, but I hadn't even opened my bank account to see how much money I had or didn't have. So you need to find the truth of your situation, or what you believe is true right now. What is causing that fear for you? And then the most powerful question you can ask with that information is it absolutely true? Is it absolutely true that you don't have enough? Is it absolutely true that there's no possible way that you can buy a home, that you can get out of debt, that you can do whatever? You can't find the down payment. Is it absolutely true? And this is where, our society has trouble, because we get locked into what we see around us. So we're very linear. This person hasn't done it. I've never done it before. I've never seen that. So we think there's like 1 or 2 possible ways that this could happen, where in reality, we live in a universe where billions, an infinite amount of possibilities exist. So start getting that clarity or awareness on how you're thinking about the situation, and then start challenging it.
That's great, because I hear when you say that, there's almost like this generational karmatic conversation, which would be social influence, how your parents have done it. It could also be social influence, could be the commentary on the marketplace, which is something that we as real estate professionals are constant, financial professionals, particularly, I'm sure your clients are like, it's pushing up against that fear to withdraw all of your cash from the market because you're concerned that it's just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Same thing. It puts people, sidelines potential buyers from realizing equity gains, because it puts them on the side because they're afraid of a market crash in real estate. And what you're saying is, take the opportunity to find out A, what's true for you, right? And then B, do some research, it sounds like. Investigate, dig deeper, and find out what is actually happening. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ask some questions. It's so interesting because people will stay in their bubble of uncertainty. I don't think I can qualify for a home, or even worse, I can't qualify for a home. There's nothing that I can do. I'm in this rock bottom position where there is no options. My belief system personally is there's always a way. And when you put that towards this conversation, when you start looking for a way, you can start sourcing other people that might know. You're not expected to know everything about everything. That's ridiculous. I think it was Henry Ford way back in the day said, I don't know everything, but I have people around me who do. So start sourcing people and asking other people what they think is going on, and going to people where you trust their professional opinion. not just, Joe on the street that you don't know, or maybe your neighbor who you would never take advice from on anything. So consult somebody that you like, know, and trust, and start asking some questions. That's what these professionals, including you and me, are here for, is to guide you through that and give you some answers.
Yeah, I feel like good professionals like us, we sort of pride ourselves on not being attached to the financial outcome of whether the consumer decides to use us as a professional.
Yeah.
We're really just sort of looking at helping people understand their thought process. I mean, that's certainly the way that it is for me, and it sounds like it is the same way for you.
Yeah.
Where I feel like a lot of people are just sort of, they need somebody that they can rumigate with, right? Like they can have a sounding board and just sort of sometimes just work through the difficult mental acrobatics that it takes to, gear up and bring up enough courage to invest in the market or buy their first house or become an investor. Whatever that roadblock is, I feel like it just takes there's a process there. And it takes somebody to sometimes just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Without an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So how do individuals block themselves from receiving? And what is a mindset in this receiving money, receiving abundance, receiving whatever, your next real estate move or, wave from the stock market, if you will. What is the mindset that keeps people stuck financially?
Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of what we're hinting at here.
Yeah. Well, and we've kind of touched on some of them. I never have enough, sitting inside of what was in the past and believing that that's the only way forward, that there's no way to go, no one can help you, that there's no options that are available. Those are all different mindsets that will keep you from receiving. Even just believing that it's hard to understand. It's hard to understand the financial industry. And I'm not saying that it's not. The financial industry is quite robust, if you will. There's a lot of moving parts. But the thing that you need to understand about money is that it's very simple in terms of the options that you have to invest in. There's only so many different categories. And I think the industry has confused things for people because a lot of people are confused, but when you take a step back and you take a breath and you get somebody to explain it to you in a way that works, then you're empowered to make decisions. It's not as complicated as you think. And you don't need to know everything about inflation and monetary policy and fiscal policy. And you don't need to know all of those details to have a good handle on your own finances or how to get your next mortgage or, how to sell your home and get into a new one. So it's the way that we see the world, our perception on how it has to be. That's the biggest sticking point because there's another possibility that lives. And that's the shift, is seeing that the way that you did it before is not necessarily the only way. There is another way that you can do it. And you can apply this to having a down payment,
When so often it's just like people just are like, well, that's just not for me, or it's not a right now. Or I can't do it. Yeah. I just simply can't. And by asking the question, like, what's possible? And maybe this is for me, and just framing it, it sounds like reframing it in a different way. There's a new opportunity, or there's another resource, or there's an opportunity to learn or source more information, get a little bit more educated, and move that conversation forward in a different way, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, are there some specific things, like when people, I know for me, when I get into a state of fear and anxiety and panic around a decision, right? I have to literally unhook myself or get into a meditative space or put myself in nature, get some sort of a state change, as Tony Robbins talks about, or I work out. There's a lot of different things. What are some of the things when you have somebody that walks into your office, or when you're in a conversation with a stranger and you can sense that they're stuck? Is there a piece of advice that you can give them to, or an exercise that you might take your clients through to get them thinking differently or unstuck?
So, because I have two separate businesses, one is the financial brokerage and one is the coaching. I won't necessarily coach my financial clients. When I see, and I don't know how many professionals are listening to your podcast. I don't know if it's more professionals and listeners or kind of a combination of
It's both.
it's
Yeah,
both.
it's both.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll give two different strategies. So when you're the professional, you can feel it. You can feel your client's fear. You can feel their worry. And, you know, it takes, women are better than men at this just because it's a natural, you know, talent and ability. It doesn't mean that men do not have this ability, because men do. It's just a practice of feeling it. So be mindful of, you know, what you're feeling in terms of their energy, because you can sense it before they even sit down in front of you. You can sense that they're feeling anxious about something, and ask some really good questions around that and keep yourself grounded. And I'm going to give you some exercises to do on the grounded side. So now, if you're the person who's feeling this, in phase 2 of the Fluid Money Blueprint, Dismantling Negative Money Perspectives, I give a 4-step system that I'm going to give you now. It's called CAST. So I love acronyms. The C is celebrate, and it sounds counterproductive. You know, why am I celebrating that I feel gross? You know, that's weird. The reason why you would do this is when you have a big reaction to something, whether this is a positive, like woohoo, or it's a negative, like swearing up a storm or something like that, your brain wakes up and is like, ooh, whatever is happening right now is important to the person. Okay. Important to me. I need to pay attention. There's something really important here. So the reason why the first step is celebrate, big and bold, is because you're teaching your brain to give you cues when you're going down a path that no longer serves you. So then next time you start to feel this same feeling, because your body is responding before your brain has even caught up. Next time this happens, your brain will be like, oh, wait a minute, there's something there. So it will cue you for the next time so that you can use this CAST. You can use this method again to calm yourself down. So that's the C. The A is acknowledge. Okay. So many times, so often, we don't want to feel anything unless it's positive. So we try and push everything down or away or whatever, but we end up just stuffing all of that down for another day. You know, the rage monster eventually erupts from within. We don't want that, because that's also influencing everything in your life. So you want to acknowledge. And the way that I do it is kind of silly. I pretend that there is a baby within me, actually a toddler, that is having a meltdown. So I simply say, baby Jody, what's wrong? And I let all of the thoughts, feelings, anything that is coming up, I let her speak. You know, I'm scared that this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And I let her talk herself out of it. And I imagine all of those feelings leaving. And that leads us to number 3, which is the system, the S. Now we have to calm your system. So as all of that is happening, you're going to breathe. If you're having, you know, an anxious response where you can't stop your heart rate, a lot of people will feel it right in their chest. They feel like something heavy is weighing down on them. They feel like their throat is closing off, and they feel like their heart is beating out of their chest. This is you in that anxiety response, and you need to calm it before you can be logical with it. Logic doesn't live there. So an easy way to do this is just to breathe. If it's really heavy, put your forehead on something hard. It could just be the desk in front of you. There is nervous system responses in your forehead as well as within your throat area, your chest. There's the vagus nerve here, so you can put your hand right here. Either one will do. And when you breathe into it while you have your head on your desk, you will feel your system completely normalize or stabilize. It'll come back to neutral. And then you feel that like relief. And now you can deal with it. And that's the T, which is it true? Whatever came up, all of those fears, that is an old pattern that you have recycled over and over again and has kept you safe somehow, or given you something that it's providing you with something, whether it's safety or comfort or whatever. You're doing it because there is a reason for you to do it, or a perception that it has to be this way. So that's when you question it. Is it true? All of those fears that came up, is it true that I can never afford a home? Not absolutely, not 100%. You don't know that, right? Is it true that I'll never get a down payment? Not absolutely. You know, you could win the lottery. You could have a family member pass away and get an inheritance. Maybe there's a loan buyback program. You know, there's all of these options that are out there. So you can't say with absolute certainty that it is a no. And when it comes to absolutes, our society lives by them. We think everything is an absolute. I just can't. I was declined once. My credit was bad. I'll never be able to be approved for a home. That's not an absolute. An absolute means it applies to everyone, the same standard all the time. So we could say, you must drink water to survive. Okay, that's an absolute. Pretty much anything else is not. Okay? You can find an example of someone who had crappy credit, who bought their first home. Maybe it was a higher interest rate. Maybe somebody was a cosigner on it. There's always another possibility. And when you get to that point of asking, is it true? What you're doing is you're lessening off of your attachment to that pattern and those thoughts. And you're opening space for yourself to see a new possibility or a new potential that exists as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times, people come into our offices, I'm sure, and that's what we do. We sit down with them and we help them solve for whatever goal they're trying to accomplish, whether that's, the buying their first home to buying up, buying down, or whatever, right? Yeah. I mean, and so many times we're walking them through possibilities that they had never even thought of. That literally is they pick up the phone and it's a yes. They just had to ask.
They just had to ask.
So this is great.
Yeah, but they were so afraid to ask. And so when you're afraid to ask that question, and those who are listening right now, they feel themselves there. Ask yourself why. Like, it's that baby, what's wrong? Like, why am I afraid to ask? I'm afraid I'm going to be embarrassed. I don't want somebody to see my financial situation. Like, I should be further along right now. I should have less debt. I should have more money. And what you're doing is you're shoulding all over yourself. And because you're not a professional, you don't actually know if that's true. I ask almost every single financial client that I get, that I service, that, after it's all done, they'll ask me like, so in terms of our age, are we doing okay? And most of the time, 99% of the time, yeah, you're right on track with where everybody else is at your age group, or you're so far ahead of where everyone else is at your age group. Like, I see thousands of financial plans, financial cases over the last 11 years that I've done this. And you can literally not surprise me with anything at this point. It's crazy, but we'll stay stuck in that fear of, I don't want to ask because I'm afraid they're going to judge me. That's not our job to judge you. And the way that I train my agents is that you're compassionate, not judgmental, because everybody has a story and a reason why they're there. And we're there to give them that hope, or that, in my opinion, is what we're there to do.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. So, and we were talking a little bit about this already, I think, with the Fluid Money Blueprint and how it can be applied to buying a house. We're kind of talking through that, I think, a little bit there. But is there anything that you would want to add to that in terms of specifically to the decision-making process of we can call it investments in general?
Yeah. We've already talked about possibilities, but I'm going to give you the actual exercise that I give my students. And this would be the third phase of the Fluid Money Blueprint. Possibilities for our brain are like a muscle. If we've been doing the same thing over and over again, or similar things for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we get stuck in that cow path. You guys have probably seen it before, where there's a giant field with like thousands of acres to the left, thousands of acres to a right. And then all of a sudden there's all of these cows just all in the same line, as if they were, herded there and they couldn't go off this path. Okay. That's what our brain does. We go down the same path over and over again. So in phase 3, I call it abundance on autopilot. One of the exercises is to strengthen that possibility muscle. So whatever it is you're trying to do, buy a home, get the down payment, get the debt down or whatever it is. I want you to take out a blank piece of paper, and I want you to put that goal in the middle of your piece of paper. And then you're going to make like a spider web chart. So you're just going to draw lines outside of that. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down all the possible ways that you could make this happen. Now, what you're going to find is that when our muscle of possibility is atrophied within our own mind, you get to 2 or 3 things that you can think of. So employ somebody else to help you. A friend or a professional like you, Bill, or someone like that, and just have a brainstorming session. Like, what else is possible? Maybe, if it's the down payment conversation, maybe you can borrow it off of somebody. Maybe you can borrow it off the bank. Maybe, there's a program that Bill has that he can help you with. Maybe, there's an inheritance coming your way. Maybe if you're an entrepreneur and you have the opportunity to go and make more money, maybe that's a possibility. And start challenging yourself to think outside of the box, that linear possibility that you had before. And what this will do, it's quite magical. When you start thinking in possibilities, your system changes, and you go from thinking this is impossible to easing off of that to thinking it's possible. Oh, it's even more possible to, yes, I am certain this can happen. And when you do that, when you move that scale, everything starts to move for you, and you start to see these new possibilities walk into your life, and something you never even thought of, like somebody dropping off money to you. This actually happened to 2 separate students while they were in my 12-week course. Somebody literally dropped off an envelope of cash in their backyard. 2 separate students, 2 separate times. Okay. That's the power of opening up those possibilities.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jodielynn, this has been great. And like I said, I think it comes at a great time when people are sort of restricted by their view of the marketplace, and there is just so much negative chatter. A lot of it just not even true about the limits of what is possible. So this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
What is a great way that if people want to reach out to you, listeners want more information about the Money Blueprint or anything that we've talked about today, how should my listeners reach out to you?
Yeah. If they're interested on the Fluid Money Blueprint side of things, the mindset and their energy, they want to really dive into that, you can go to my website. It's just JodielynnCraven.com. And I have an I and an E in my name. I'm sure there'll be some sort of show notes that we can include that.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for sure.
All of my courses, everything that I offer is under the services tab. But as soon as you get onto my website, there's a pop-up on there, and it'll ask you if you want to enter into a free training. That free training goes through common mistakes that entrepreneurs make when trying to attract more money, and how they can get access to that 12-week course with the Fluid Money Blueprint.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show today. I found the conversation valuable and enlightening. And this has been another episode of Bill the Lender podcast, where we talk about all things financial services related and how it impacts your real estate finance. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to Bill the Lender podcast. Please reach out to me with any questions at 303-877-6323.